And we're back to learn about the competition. So the competition, interestingly enough, are not names that we saw on the Forrester Wave. So, well, actually, Microsoft technically is. So we're going to get into who Kissflow apparently believes are their biggest competitors. So we're going to start with Pega. Streamlined responses for clear comparison. So concern number one is complexity and learning curve. Pega is complex and takes nearly a year just to be a basic developer. It's hard to learn. Interesting. Our response is that we can quickly enable even business analysts to master Kissflow and have a user-friendly interface designed for ease of use and quick proficiency. Great. So I guess complexity and learning curve just, again, makes a lower barrier for being able to use the platform. Concern two is cost and implementation. Pega is $90 per user per month and requires multi-million SI contracts. That's systems integrators. That means you can't really buy direct. You need a channel partner to support you in implementing. And channel is basically a way of saying that a third party, some other company, has to help you when purchasing and implementing the solution. Response, so the quotes are apparently cheaper than $90 per user per month, and there's no need for heavy SI contracts. I don't know if that means you never need one or if what you need is just light support, but you don't need heavy contracts by comparison. So it is cost effective. So cost of implementation is theoretically cheaper and I would imagine faster than what Pega can offer. Another is product visibility and development time. So Pega doesn't showcase the product very well, and even basic applications take significant time and expertise to build. Interesting. Okay. Our response is that Kissflow can actively demonstrate features and capabilities while showcasing its intuitive interface and invite prospects to witness how quickly applications can be developed, suggesting a direct comparison or a bake-off, kind of like a proof of concept. Okay, so if they're using Pega or if they're evaluating Pega, we have some insight on a few different things. That it's easier to adopt, cheaper and faster to implement. I feel like this is related, but I guess it's like, it's not so much about implementation, but about usability. And then development speed. When development takes months, Kissflow's demo takes 30 minutes, and they can set applications up quickly and efficiently. All right. And Pega's uncertain future. They have legal issues, uncertainties with their leadership, and their stock price as a publicly traded company is plummeting. Interesting. Oh, how about that? Address the prospect's concerns by asking if they're confident using a vendor with those challenges. Fair question. All right. Nintex. Nintex obscures pricing and involves additional implementation costs. That's common in software. I mean, sometimes they move money around to different categories, different SKUs. Some companies just want one line item to highlight the price. Other companies have like 5 line items to show their various price models. Kissflow's pricing is transparent, no hidden fees, clarity right from the start. Fair enough. Support and training. Nintex is slow to offer support. Their training's complex. Whereas Kissflow is attentive, addresses needs promptly, highlights it wants us to highlight how even novices can be productive within weeks. Lengthy implementation time. They don't have a clear go live kind of window, but I would presume that means it's faster than 6 to 9 months. And they are facing pressure from Microsoft's platform. Prepare for comparison, including Power Apps, understanding the client's needs thoroughly. Okay. Kissflow versus business. I'm just not sure how this relates to Nintex. They're facing pressure. I mean, if they're facing pressure, are we not all? Prepare for comparison, including Power Apps. Understanding the client's needs thoroughly. Okay. So I guess if someone's, what it feels like they're coming from is that if somebody's evaluating Nintex, Microsoft's probably a player, and so we'd better just be prepared if Nintex is involved, be ready to to be in an RFP type of situation or a very competitive situation. Bizagi, simplifying complexity. So demands extensive training, requires BPMN knowledge, a unique language. Oh. Lengthy implementation and outdated tech stack. I don't know why it's outdated tech stack. Rapid implementation. We compete with a rapid implementation and a modern cloud-based architecture. Okay, maybe they're, well, I don't know. I mean, okay, outdated tech stack, whatever that means for them, for Bizagi. Is it their infrastructure that's outdated? Are they on, what are they building on then? Kissflow versus Appian, a way forward. They have a complex certification process, their licenses are expensive, and they have litigation issues. Okay. So again, we're talking about ease of use, lower costs, or at least competitive if it's related, if the costs are similar, and then what kind of business do you want to work with? Oh, we have a formatting issue here. Appian, demystifying the challenges. So they have a limited implementation guarantee. They only have 30 days to guarantee. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty short. Transition from on-prem to cloud. They were originally on-prem. That's probably what was going on here then with Bizagi. So if they're an on-prem and then, oh, they moved to cloud. Despite the transition, numerous clients still prefer on-premise deployments. Oh yeah, of course, makes sense. Indicating potential challenges in cloud adoption. Yeah, that could be a problem. I get that. Complex amalgamate. So on-premise versus cloud. I don't remember how much I talked about this in the last video, but it's important that you know that I had mentioned at one point that you can build your own infrastructure if you wanted to. Infrastructure, in large part, basically means what kind of hardware do you want to have. So in a way, you could build, servers and server rooms and get racks and buy out business parks, warehouses, and have your own servers and your own, I think they're called server farms, but basically you could have your own data center. But in most cases, why pay for a data center when you're not in the data center business, right? Very few companies actually do that. A lot of companies have on-premise data centers, but very few companies will build an app and then build their own data center to support that app. I mean, not at least in a traditional sense. Again, I'm not saying that companies don't build data centers, but it's a common sentiment that to adopt the cloud means to get out of the data center business. A lot of companies just have on-premise data centers, and they want to reduce that overhead. It doesn't make business sense for just any company to be renting or leasing office buildings and having their own servers or their own data centers, or building properties that have data center like environments. I don't know how to describe them. I'm not that familiar with the industry, but the point is, when you have a lot of data center stuff and you're not using cloud, then, well, there are customers who want to see on-premise, they want to see cloud, they want to see a hybrid. It depends on the size of the company, and I realize I've bitten off more than I can chew trying to explain this, but big picture is some companies want to keep things on-premise. They want to buy a software, they want to install it in their infrastructure, and they don't want it accessing the cloud or going out there, and that's fine. That some companies still want that. More often than not, though, you're going to see companies welcome an adoption of using cloud, like building on Google Cloud or AWS, Azure, wherever. And if they're open to it, that's great too. So for a platform to be flexible between supporting companies who want things on-premise versus leveraging the cloud, that's what they're talking about here. If this company, for example, Bizagi, if they have an outdated tech stack, maybe they just can't keep up with the customers who want cloud, or maybe it's the other way around. Their platform for some reason is, they're using on-premise data centers like Apple and a bunch of other companies, but they can't keep up because they don't have the latest architectures that come from being in the cloud. Because of course, anyone who's in the data center business, they have to buy their own servers and all the whatever hardware they need to have a data center. Like GPUs and CPUs and all that. But like if you're trying to build an app, why are you trying to build a data center, right? Let Azure, let AWS, let the hyperscalers, those guys, let them invest in their data centers and just build off of them. That would be the ideal scenario, I imagine, for most cases. But again, some companies don't like cloud. They want things privately on-premise. Which one's more secure? It's a whole debate you can find on YouTube and Reddit, but I won't go there. So I'm getting the idea, though. Like, these guys, I mean, it's their implementation, at least for Appian here, their implementation guarantees weak. There's this weird scenario about, on-premise versus cloud. Their various products are complex. What is this? Kubernetes and Mega Modeler. Okay, so they're basically saying that if you have Appian, there are other costs that come with it. So not only are you buying Appian, whatever that license and implementation cost is, but they require that you use other stuff to make it work, which means those are other vendors you have to have. Can you imagine if you wanted to buy, like, I don't know, if you wanted to buy a DVD player? Nobody does that anymore. But just imagine, you wanted to buy a DVD player, and for some reason, like, the remote for the DVD player is sold by another company. Or I guess in the same logic, you could say, I want to buy a PlayStation 5. So you buy the PlayStation 5, but you have to buy the controller from some other company. Like, not only does it not come with it, you have to go somewhere else, like a different store, to buy it. It just doesn't make sense. Like, some things should be closer together. Although there are models where this is okay. I don't know this industry well, but maybe there's a place where buying Appian from Appian and then buying Mega Modeler and KDB database, that actually I realize I might be reading that wrong. I don't know if that's Kubernetes. But, buying these might make sense for this industry or the way they work. But, this company, I forget what they're called already, Kissflow, is suggesting that this is a bad thing. So we're going to say this ties to people getting hit with these like sleeper expenses that they might not have planned in their budget for evaluating these tools. Sales scripting and language complexity introduces a scripting language called Sail, which lacks public availability. Contrast this with low-code, no-code platforms, implying a steeper learning curve. So I guess what they're trying to say is you have to use some scripting language that isn't publicly available, and so so it's like hard to build because there isn't a big community around it, I guess. Like, I think I'd mentioned it in the last video. A lot of developers spend a lot of time just Googling stuff and looking on forums and using AI to try and find code that solves their problems so they don't have to manually figure out every single line one by one. Sometimes it's inefficient. Sometimes, hey, somebody else found a problem that was more creative than what you could come up with, or that was good enough, and you can just piggyback off of that to stay more efficient or increase your throughput as a performer at work. So that this is a fair assessment to say, like, hey, if there's something that isn't easily or publicly or widely available from a community, then it's going to slow you down and it's hard to deal with. So this point makes sense. Certification challenges. Apparently Appian has a certification process, and the time it takes to learn is a lot. You have to, and it's also doesn't seem to be well consolidated, I guess. You have to check forums and basically figure things out with the community to get answers and stuff, or to learn. So it's not just the fact that you have a special scripting language, but you have to go and learn it from somewhere, and it's hard to learn from. Cost discrepancies and litigation concerns. So I guess they position themselves as being budget friendly, but they never really show the full picture, or they might not actually be. And then on top of that, they have a reputation of being litigious and have legal challenges. Fair enough, if you say so. So this next competitor is Microsoft Power Platform. Microsoft, as a comparison, they advise against, pricing and discounts. So we advise against undercutting prices. Partners can offer up to a 40%. Wait, I don't know which tone this is taking. Recommend staying competitive within the market range. Honestly, this isn't even, none of this is, I mean, this is all good to know, but it's not really relevant for the everyday conversation with an SDR. It's important that SDRs know this, because sometimes these names come up in conversations and it's helpful to have some context. They're there's a whole exercise I can take you through in handling objections against these competitors, but I'm gonna hold on to that for a future video because I don't even know if I'm really gonna need it. So complex learning curve with Microsoft. Yeah, so these apps that Microsoft has that solves the same problems that Kissflow has, they come from Microsoft just buying out those companies. Apparently those products were once companies. And since they've been bought out, they all have their own learning curve. And, you know, I guess sometimes with acquisitions, you can make the argument that sometimes these products just got acquired for an idea, for tech, for a customer list, and then there's the question of how much better are they really? All they were was bought out by another company, but were they made better? So it seems to be suggesting that what took people 3 months to do in Microsoft, it would take 15 minutes in Kissflow. Limited process automation challenges the notion of Power Automate being a comprehensive process. Questions its industry exists. I guess Power Automate being a Microsoft product, it doesn't work well with its own Microsoft ecosystem. So you're kind of throwing what's called FUD. So there's a term we use a lot in sales. It's called FUD. It's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So when you throw FUD on a prospect, you're trying to like somewhat respectfully knock the competition, take them down a peg, by asking questions that make a prospect question their whole perception of the competitor. If done well, tactfully and professionally and respectfully, it can be a very powerful tool. But FUD has a tendency, and sometimes it's comical to see, but FUD has a tendency to be companies just bashing each other. And sometimes I find that amusing. So API limitations and siloed functionality, that makes sense. Yeah, so I guess APIs are what allow any app to talk to other apps. It's kind of like saying, I have an app that has information and I have another app that has fields, and I want the information to go in those fields. Oftentimes an integration or an API or webhook or whatever terms are used, it's a way to get two different platforms built on two different they're just two different platforms. How do we get one to talk to the other, or push information to the other, or pull information back, or all of that? So that's often done or built custom with APIs. And so with API limitations, that means if you have Microsoft, you might not be able to do as much with it as you would Kissflow, apparently. If that's something we call out for Microsoft, I imagine it's because we could do it better, right? So, and then lastly, analytical coverage. Affirms that their analytics cover Power BI functionality, suggests a comprehensive approach to data. Sorry, I don't really know what that means. So I guess that's it. We covered competitors. So let's, I'm not going to do, so I have worksheets, I have all kinds of exercises that I go through for all of these categories, but given that I'm working a little slower to record this content for you, and really in the spirit of trying to get to the phones quickly, I'm just going to speed through this to see how much deeper I really need to go into educating myself on Kissflow. Because from what I gather on this training material, it's kind of surface level. It's only kind of okay. This isn't a knock to Kissflow's sales enablement group. I don't know who wrote these courses, who was responsible for it. For all I know, this was written by some sales leader already. And I mean, it's not great, but I mean, who am I to assume that I could do better, right? Sometimes more information is helpful. Sometimes it's important. Other times, you just need to be very pointed and very aggressive about what you need to know to be successful. And some companies just don't really ever get there. Some companies really just want to tell you their whole story and get you to drink the Kool-Aid, and they think everyone else should too, and that's the message that your leadership pushes, is some drink the Kool-Aid, come to Jesus, join my cult kind of messaging. And that can be kind of devastating, because when we come back, as an example, before I close out this video, this ICP thing in buyer persona, you'll remember that when we went over this, there's very little about the ICP. All we know is that it has to be companies in this industry with 1,000 or more employees. And so what this brings up is, and this is why I harped on this issue in the last video about why it's so important for an SDR to be in control of their lists, or to have somebody who really knows what they're doing to be pushing lists out to SDRs, is that I'm not expecting that every lead on a list has to be an inbound qualified lead, somebody raising their hand asking for pricing because they converted on a website. What's important is that we think about signals, things that are happening, what the processes of the potential buyer or their team is actually going through day to day. And if they have hundreds of Fortune 500 companies in their portfolio, then shoot, they should know better than anyone. And those use cases, or if not use cases, then those that thought leadership perspective of what makes Kissflow better should be the core of how an SDR decides who to call, what message to align with that person, so that I don't sound like I'm talking to the wrong guy when they pick up, or gal. No, that's the kind of stuff that enables sales. Not like, I remember reading a bunch of marketing speak around here. And so, a lot of this was marketing speak, I think, that like multiple paragraphs. Like, that's nice, it's fluffy, it feels good, but it's not going to make me a better salesperson, so to speak. Not when you only have 2 criteria for a company. There's got to be more criteria to help us determine whether the company really belongs on a target list, or have some sort of, there are lots of ways marketing can be involved, but I'm kind of getting outside my bounds a bit, so I'm going to leave it at that. Next video, now that after such a long intro, I'm going to try to keep each subsequent video relatively short, or at least like one section at a time. So for now, we're done with the competition. I'll see you in the next video for qualification criteria. That's what's going to help us understand how we get paid.